You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson Karbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game and Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Before we dive into the episode, a little self-promotion. Stop what you're doing. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap. Join the discussion on our Facebook group. We have over 2,500 members. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Panthers on Tap. It is official. The Carolina Panthers have agreed to terms with Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales for the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. This is now the seventh head coach under David Tepper since he's taken over this team. Bryson, I just want to get your initial reaction. Kudos to you for really breaking this earlier in the week, but your reaction to Canales coming to Carolina.
Yeah, thank you. I personally was a fan of it. I think if you can tell by my Twitter feed and my quick change of name on Twitter to not Dave Canales now. So yeah, I think we got to change that on that little bottom thing that scrolls across.
Oh yeah, good call. I will just hide that for now. But
Okay.
dude, you were quick on the jump with that too, with the
Yeah.
changeover. It was quick, man.
I didn't want anyone else to take it. So yeah, I do like the hire. I think obviously there were bigger names available in this coaching cycle, like Mike Vrabel, or I mean even like people like Bill Belichick or Ben Johnson. But I think Carolina went with who's comfortable working in Carolina, and what they wanted specifically was an offensive coordinator or an offensive-minded head coach to work with Bryce Young, and not one that's going to be around for a while. So they went with a younger guy. Yeah, he only has 1 year of experience as an offensive coordinator, but the most experienced offensive coordinators in the league are 2 years. So usually at the 2-year mark, you're either you have another job lined up as a head coach or you're fired. So I think Canales has done some things in Tampa, obviously, that were impressive. We know in Carolina, Baker was not good when he was here, and it was probably a lot to do with the scheme, obviously, that he was under and the offensive line and the weapons that he had. But to have the year that he had, which is his best career in his existence in the NFL under Canales, was extremely impressive. And then you go back and you tie it to him to Geno Smith as a quarterback's coach and Russell Wilson. So he's well respected around the league. Everybody says he's extremely intelligent, super personable. I think that you can tell from some of the interviews that he's given throughout his time with the Bucs. And when he was asked about, interviewing, being requested for an interview in Carolina, I think his answer was super transparent and honest about this is something that he's wanted to do for a long time. And, he's got stuff prepared, but he's focused on his job right now. And he is thankful for the opportunity to interview. But I just really liked that answer from him. And then you see the video of when he's crying, talking about the opportunity that Todd Bowles gave him, and he just wanted to make him proud. Like, this is the kind of coach that is going to get players fired up to play for him. And I really do think it's more about the relationship that you make with the players and the respect that's built mutually in regards to building a culture in a locker room. And I think that Canales can do that, as well as take this offense to the next step and give Bryce Young the scheme and the coaching that he needs. Because like we've said, Canales has proven that he can resurrect quarterbacks, and not that Bryce needs resurrection, but he needs footing in the NFL, and he definitely didn't get that last year. And hopefully under Canales, that's what happens, and that's what he gets. I am interested to see who he brings in as his OC, and I guess Evero doesn't have much of a choice unless he gets a head coaching job. But keeping Evero as a defensive coordinator, I think would be a major win for Canales. So interested moving forward with how the staff fills out, but if I had to give a grade to the hire, I would say that it's a B plus, based off of his track record in the league. And then there were some probably potentially hotter candidates, but I think I said today on Twitter when I was in a space with Ricky, I really think that Carolina got on Canales a year early. If he would have stayed with the Bucks and had another year with Baker playing like he played, Canales would have been the hot name next year in the next cycle, and Carolina probably wouldn't have had a chance to get him then because he would have had probably 5, 6 interviews across the league. So I do think when you're a team like Carolina, you have to strike early to get one of these guys, one of these big names, potential names. Like last year, they were in on Ben Johnson before anyone was in on Ben Johnson. So, and now they miss out on him this year. So, it is what it is. But I think Canales is a good fit in Carolina, his personality wise. I know we're going to get into a little bit later, but the owner is going to be frustrating. I just hope Dan Morgan and Canales can separate themselves and really take this franchise to a level that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, my coworker asked me today, late in the day, what do you think of Canales? And my answer was, I don't know. I don't. I don't know how to really feel. I'm not overly excited and I'm not like down in the dumps. I'm just kind of, it's a wait and see approach, I guess, for me. Um, I think there are obviously pros and cons at any hire you look at. Um, and I hope just from some of the things that I've read on him and I've watched that documentary that Josh Norris pushed out about a half hour last night on him and kind of really delving deep into the Bucks late run this past season to make the playoffs and kind of going in and out with just interviews with Canales as well and just offensive players, which I thought was really well put together. But there are things to like there. I've read some things from people that worked with him. The guy that runs the Senior Bowl, that's escaping my mind. He put out something tonight.
Nagy.
Yeah, Nagy, and put some good stuff out. But it sounds like he's got some pretty good leadership qualities to him, and he's a really good communicator. And I think that was one of the big things that Frank Reich lacked this past season. And I think there needs to be one clear message for this team and for, the prize possession and Bryce Young. So I'm hoping he can get that out of them. Like you said, I think it was probably a year early. But the way, David Tepper has put the Panthers and the situation they're in, it almost seemed like they had to go out and make a hire like this, whether you wanted to believe all the other outside buzz with all the other candidates. And then, some of the concerns that we've talked about, I'm not going to reiterate some of the offensive stuff. But also the fact that, the Panthers are the only team to interview him. And it just begs the question, why didn't Seattle try to go after him? And then maybe it's just they wanted to get out of the Pete Carroll regime because, Canales, moved his way up with Pete Carroll. So that could make sense, but I thought that was kind of interesting because, they are trying to go after Dan Quinn, or they've interviewed him a couple times. So that was just a little interesting to me, but I also think there's maybe some sour grapes there with Canales. And you watch some of his videos when he talked about not getting the OC job there. It sounded like he was pretty pissed off about it. So, yeah, I'm just in a wait and see approach. I'm not going to get too high, too low. I'm always going to have some optimism. I think obviously as a fan when there's a new coach coming in, but I'm going to temper expectations. I'm not going to make any predictions on this season. I'm not going to get bamboozled like I did last year. I'm not doing that. So when we hit summer, I'm not doing a record. I'm not going to sit here and say this team's ready for this is going to take time. And I think for him, and hopefully Dave gives him the time, I think this is going to take patience. There's going to be rough spots. I mean, the Bucks were 4-7 at one point this year. No one was talking about them making the playoffs. So, I mean, this thing could have shifted a whole nother way for them. So, I think people just need to temper expectations. This is going to be a couple year process with him, and we just need to let this ride out, give him a chance, and we'll see what he can do. And I don't think there's any wrong approach to any of it. I don't knock people that are excited for him. I don't knock people that are skeptical about it. I don't knock people that totally hate it. Like that's just the way it is. That's how we are as fans, and we'll kind of see how this approach takes. But I kind of wanted to get into some of the things that have come out, and we'll get to the latest here with this later on with David Tepper. But Joe Person had put this out, and I thought was interesting because it was a question that I kind of had in the back of my mind going into all this. And Joe answered it in his article tonight, and that was with Bryce Young. And Bryce Young was kind of cued in on the head coaching process throughout, which I thought was interesting because in years past, I don't think this has happened before. So for him to be, cued in on this situation, I think is, how highly they think of him. And then obviously Bryce, through sourcing that Joe has gathered, it sounds like he's pretty optimistic about Canales and, just how young he is and his strong track record. You talked about it. We don't know how much of a role he played, but he definitely played a role in the Geno Smith comeback year. The guy won the award, and then he's obviously the OC for Baker and resurrected Baker's career, and they're talking about a contract extension for him. But yeah, I mean, this is good. This is what you want. I talked about this, or I tweeted this out before the GM and coach search started. And I know you believe the same thing. Alignment is key in all this. Like Morgan, Canales, Bryce Young, the front office and the coaching staff, everyone needs to be aligned in this. When you have alignment, guys in those positions, things will work out for you. When you have disagreement like Tennessee had, when you had disagreement with, there's other things you can point out, that's where it goes sideways. So that is key. And I think that's important. And I think that's another pro of bringing in a guy like Canales, because he is so aligned with Dan Morgan, and that's what you want. Look at the San Frans of the world. I mean, those guys, Shanahan and John Lynch, are lockstep. I mean, they know what they want and what fits the San Francisco way, and it's been successful. So that is promising. But just your thoughts on the Bryce Young stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows the belief that they have in Bryce. Also, they realize how much they've invested in him and wanting to get him a coach that, one, he believes in, and two, believes in him. So I like that they kept him involved throughout the process. Probably didn't give him final say on what coach they hired, but at least got his opinion, obviously, on what he thought about certain guys. And I think that's important for your, franchise quarterback that you've invested so much draft capital in, to get him into a situation that he's comfortable with, and a coach that he believes in that's leading him in the right direction. So I do like that that they involved Bryce in this. I think that was smart, and I think it's going to aid in the welcoming of Dave Canales to Carolina, and then they can hit the road running. That relationship between quarterback and head coach.
What are your thoughts, and you touched on it a little bit here, thoughts on Evero sticking around? It sounds like he still has a couple irons in the fire with the head coach interviews, but besides that, it seems highly unlikely they would allow a lateral move. Do you want to see him back, or do you want to see someone else in there? I thought I saw today maybe a Leslie Frazier was brought up as a possible guy that Canales could bring along with him. Just thoughts on Evero and his spot at DC.
I really liked Evero as the defensive coordinator. I thought that he did really good work with a lot of injuries in different areas with that defense. They struggled against the run continuously, but you can't deny the secondary play improving under him. Burns took a step back, I guess you could say, but how much was that injury or him being upset about a contract? Who knows? But I think Evero is a very good defensive coordinator. I think that shows with the amount of head coaching interviews that he's had. And I think if Carolina can keep him, obviously, I think that's probably the best play for them. But if a team like the Rams comes calling and asking for him to come back to LA to be their defensive coordinator, and he has that conversation with Canales and, you know, Dan Morgan and David Tepper about wanting to go back to where he started his career, and that's where his heart's at, and blah 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 blah. Then I mean, are they going to tell him no when a guy just doesn't want to be here? I don't know if they're going to tell him no. They might allow him to take that lateral move and let Canales bring in a guy that wants to be there, and that's a Canales guy. So I don't know. I'm not saying Evero is going to do that, but I could see that as a possibility just because that's where Evero pretty much started his coaching career um, in a more prominent role. And I think LA is going to have a significant interest in getting him back because they know how much of a good candidate he is for a defensive coordinator. He's going to be a head coach soon. If not this cycle, it's going to be next cycle. So you're going to lose him eventually. It's just a matter of time. So I guess it really depends on, how Canales feels about him. Obviously, there's some respect there. I think there was an interview where he was talking about Evero and how he's always scheming against the Bucs offense. That I think both times we played the Bucs, we held them to like season low points, and I think Canales has a lot of mutual respect. And if I had to guess, I would say he's going to try to keep him around. But I think ultimately it just you got to talk to the man. You don't want someone who's not happy there coaching just because he's under contract. So I think having that conversation is what's most important and seeing where his head's at. If he doesn't get a head coaching job this season, which it seems like he's not going to, I feel like probably Atlanta was his best choice or his best option or chance to be a head coach. Seattle, I feel like, is really going to go with Dan Quinn or a coach that's still in the playoffs currently. So, I mean, if I was Canales, I would try to keep him around and do anything that I could. But ultimately, it's going to be Everett's decision. I do think that's the truth.
I think it's going to be David Tepper's. And I would be stunned if they allowed a lateral move. And the only reason why is David Tepper brought in Thomas Brown and Evero, whether you want to admit it or not only because they were really good coaches, but in the back of his mind, thinking what Shanahan has done in San Francisco is when those guys get a head coaching job in 1 to 2 years, Carolina can recruit a third round pick. And I think that's all his eyes are set on. And they need one more year because you need 2 years a coach, 2 years as a coordinator before they can go off and you actually get compensation for it. And I think that's what Tepper has in mind. And I think that is a smart move. And I also really like Evero. I think he's a hell of a coach, and he is going to become a head coach hopefully soon. He just can't. I mean, he can't go into another season where a coach is fired because he's running out of options. He's had some really bad shakes. So, but yeah, I think Tepper is going to force that hand. I think Tepper is going to force him to stay here. I really do, unless I would be shocked if he's not the DC, to be totally honest with you. And I think it goes I think there's some value to that with a first-year head coach because Evero has kind of been around the block a couple times now as DC, and that way, Canales can just solely focus on offense. And Evero's got his guys. He's been in the building a year, kind of knows the ropes, knows where things. He can kind of be a sounding board too. So I think there's value in keeping him. I do think, though, Canales should have a say. I don't think it should be Tepper's hand, but that's just how David Tepper is, and I can just see that happening. But I do hope there are coaches. I hope they don't keep guys around like Campen and stuff like that. I hope Canales has a say on all that because you can't force like you did last year, Tepper. You just can't do it. It did not work out. Let him bring in his own guys. And I think, like you said, I think you were the one that actually posted the Canales stuff talking about Evero today. And it sounds like he thinks pretty highly of him. And this is kind of breaking news. I'm just going to add this in here while we're talking. Adam Schefter just put out the Panthers are giving Canales a 6-year contract. So I think the other couple guys were 5-year deals. From what I remember, maybe that was Brian Callahan in Tennessee, but a 6-year deal. I don't know what the figures are. I'm sure it's going to be a big old check for him. But yeah, that's a 6-year contract. So some breaking news there, and I'm sure more will come out as we're talking here. But I do think there's benefit in keeping Ejiro Evero around. And he got some guys playing at a pretty high level that were kind of on the downward, spiral this past year. So I think there's value there. And he really got a bad shake with injuries, and this defense still performed. I mean, they held the Bucs to 9 points that last game, like insane. So just something to keep in mind. Any idea, I don't know if you've seen a lot of the reports today, but any idea of any guys that we should look out for that Canales is going to bring along with him here in Carolina?
Yeah, I saw John on Twitter pointed out that when Canales took the job in Tampa, he brought with him a coach from Seattle. I think his name is Bobby Idzek, the wide receivers coach in Tampa currently. So I would probably keep an eye out for him because of the relationship that they have together as the potential.
Do you think he'd be? I've seen that name too. Do you think he'll be the wide receivers coach, or do you think he's going to be like the quote unquote like OC? Obviously, Canales will call plays, but he'll be like the title for it.
I think he would be a candidate for the OC. I don't think he would come over as a wide receivers coach, make a lateral move, but I think that he would make the list of interviewees for the offensive coordinator for Canales. You can look around the league at different quarterbacks coaches that are in waiting to be an OC. And you look at, I think Cincinnati promoted theirs as offensive coordinator. The Rams quarterbacks coach is a hot candidate for the Falcons and Raheem Morris to be their offensive coordinator. So you could look at maybe like the quarterbacks coach in Houston. The name's escaping me off the top of my head, but he is a pretty well-known quarterbacks coach. The quarterbacks coach in San Francisco. There's options out there for Canales, but the most important thing, I think, in my opinion, is that he's going to be calling plays, and you're not going to be losing an offensive coordinator every 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, you need that. You absolutely need that.
That consistency for Bryce is what's going to be the most important thing, and I think that's what they were looking for in this next head coach. While the offensive coordinator does matter, they probably structure the offense on a week-to-week basis, but the head coach is going to be calling the plays. So I think it's important for Canales to get someone he's comfortable with and he trusts, obviously, to structure that offense in the playbook that Canales creates for his team.
I think it's interesting because I know we just brought this up with the contract. So Matt Rule was given a 7-year, and then correct me if I'm wrong, Wright got 4 years. Or was it 3? It was 4. So now he goes back to 6. I think that's interesting. So I don't know if this is telling, he's going to be a little bit more patient because he's given him a longer term deal, kind of like what he did with Rule. I don't know what to read into that. It's David Tepper. This guy is impatient. So
he doesn't have a choice but to be patient at this point. He cannot fire another coach. He cannot, or he will not get anyone to take the job. So he has no choice but to be patient. And I think that shows in the contract. He's going to have to at least, at the very minimum, give it half of that. Give it 3 years and see what happens in 3 years. And I think that's what it's going to take for a lot of these things for the Panthers to wash through the roster mistakes that Fitterer's made. And if they do progress in a forward manner, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years to fill holes and draft players and develop them and get an offense implemented and get players comfortable in that offense. It's going to take time. So Tepper has to be patient. Fans have to be patient. It's hard for us as fans to be patient because we've sucked for 5 years, 6 years in a row, and we want to win and we want to compete. But ultimately, we are where we're at, and there's nothing we can do about it.
So. Well, the Texans didn't do anyone any favors either. I mean, you look from a team who had the number 2 pick into the divisional round of the playoffs, like that was rare. It does not happen very often, but people are going to, jump onto that and take that all the way to the bank. There's other variables there. They hired a hell of a coach. They drafted a hell of a quarterback. They had a pick in the top 10 besides Stroud. Like, they hit on most of their drafts. So, like, things off the lineup. It's doable, but I think it's so unrealistic for fans to have that expectation with just how bad this roster is. And Carolina doesn't have a first round pick, which is it makes things even worse. So there are some hard decisions that Morgan is going to have to do, over these next couple months to set Carolina up for the future. And I don't envy that man. It is going to be tough to make some of those things, and key players on this team that fans really like and that are good. And there's going to be some hard decisions made over this, next couple months. I wanted to show just get some perspective from Buccaneers fans, because I feel like sometimes this is telling on where things could go with a coach. Again, fans are reactive, overreactive. We all know that, but it's nice to get a different perspective from the actual fan base that, saw Dave Canales every Sunday. So I just pulled some of these tweets that someone shared with me, and you guys can see it. They're not happy. Let's just put it that way. They wanted Canales to stick around, clearly. The one from Andrew here, Andrew Hale, clean house on the coat. This guy he wants Todd Bowles out of there. Like, he is done with everything. So I think this kind of just shows you what fans thought of him, and kind of maybe a glimpse of what we could see. But just anything you picked up, Bryson, from just your interactions today too on Twitter with people, or things that you saw with, Tampa Bay and their fan base.
Yeah, I think I have the similar stance as you. I think most Bucs fans were upset with him leaving. I know they kind of went through a lull in the middle of the season, and Canales kind of went back into the playbook and sat down with Baker and scrapped what wasn't working and tried to implement new things that actually started working and got the Bucs into the playoffs. So, and then they won a playoff game against a team that was in the Super Bowl last year. So I think it was impressive, again, what Canales did throughout last year. He even went through some tribulations through the season. And like you mentioned, they were 4-7 at one point. And, if they don't make playoffs, is he a hot candidate, or does Carolina even interview him? I don't know. But obviously he did some impressive things. So what's the saying that you always have about the streets?
Streets don't lie, man. Streets don't lie. They don't. Most of the time they don't. So, again, I hope this guy proves that. I hope he proves me wrong and everyone else wrong. And again, I'm not going into this like he's going to fail, but like, there are people that are down in the dumps on this decision, and I hope he proves every single one of them wrong, and me to an extent, because I've tried to been, optimistic about it. Any head coach they've hired, but David Tepper makes it fucking impossible as the owner. And I hate to be so negative about it, but it's just, I don't know how you can be positive with decisions this guy makes, because time and time again, he fucks up royally. So, sorry, I don't want to go on a soapbox because I'm sure people don't want to hear it, but it's so infuriating with him being the owner of my favorite team. So, but let's talk for a minute here before we get back into Canales, because I want to mention this, because Joe had this in his article this evening that he reported on about the hire, and we mentioned Vrabel quite a bit yesterday, so I think it's worth us talking about. And Joe reported that the interview with Vrabel was a way to provide the coach leverage with the Atlanta Falcons. Kind of sucks. I'm not really surprised, but I had some hope there that maybe, there was some interest in Carolina, but it clearly sounds like that was not the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, obviously. We were both pretty high on Vrabel, as a guy that is a culture setter, a coach that doesn't take no for an answer, and uh, a guy that could separate the team from the owner, I think, in a pretty effective manner. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a leverage play. I had tweeted that today that I thought it was, because it was hard to believe that Vrabel was interested in this job. I mean, just to put it bluntly, because of the things we mentioned with the owner, obviously, and the roster, the way it's constructed, it just didn't seem like a job that Vrabel would want. But I guess if you're choosing between not having a job or having a job, then you could be interested in it, especially a head coaching job in the NFL, which there's only 32. So, I think ultimately Carolina probably had their guy the day when they were interviewing Canales, and like Person said, I guess they were doing Vrabel a favor in regards to giving him leverage with the Falcons, which is strange. But the Falcons obviously didn't work because they went with Raheem Morris today. So I'm was kind of happy with that decision that the Falcons made. Preferred Morris for them over a couple other guys they were interviewing, but Morris again was a good hire, I think, for the Falcons. So yeah, I mean that's an interesting nugget that Joe dropped on us, but I'm not surprised with the way this team operates. They're doing weird shit like this out of the blue.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. Okay, so I want to talk about this because this came out probably about an hour ago. Carolina making it official. They've agreed to terms. We mentioned that off the top, but I want to get into this article. So there's some new quotes in here that I think we need to talk about. Let's start with David Tepper's quote. This is talking about Canales. He said, Dave's background is rooted in success. He has an innovative mindset and a positive energy that connects well with players and staff. We are impressed with his ability to bring out the best in players. So, I mean, some pretty high regard from the man, writing the checks in Carolina. Just thoughts on Tepper's comments there.
Yeah, I think it's the way that we felt about Canales throughout the interview process is that I think Canales' best attribute is obviously his connection with players and his ability to kind of give off that aura of positivity and upbeat and energetic, and the complete opposite of what Frank Reich was in Carolina, and you could probably say what Matt Rule was as well. So I think that he's a change of pace for Carolina. I don't know if he's the youngest coach that they've hired ever, but he's probably close, if not the youngest.
I would say he's probably the youngest. I'll try to search that while you're talking.
I would say that's probably a safe bet to say he's the youngest, and obviously he's a player's coach. I mean, every single time you look at a player talking about him, whether it's Greg Olsen or it's Rashad White from the Bucs, or Mike Evans or Baker Mayfield, all of these players speak highly of him, Canales, and it's not just your typical, he's a good coach, he helped me do the, like, they're speaking about his personality, the way that he is on an everyday basis. He's consistently himself and supports people to be themselves as well, and put them in positions to be the best player that they can be. So I'm super excited about Canales. I really am. I think I'm probably one of the most excited people to have him in Carolina. I've been high on him throughout the process. He wasn't my number one option, but I preferred him over other guys like Raheem Morris and a couple, even promoting Evero. I preferred Canales over. So I think Canales is a step in the right direction for Carolina, and it's nice to hear Tepper say that, but I don't trust anything Tepper says. So I don't know if he's telling the truth on that, or if he really wanted Ben Johnson and he just couldn't get him because Ben Johnson said no, and this is his fallback option, and he's just trying to save face, or what. But I think for fans, as long as we can continue to have the patience that is going to be required and the positive mindset that we're going to have, because Bryce Young's starting from square one essentially in the NFL. It's going to be a rookie season all over again, probably a new offense. I believe he's going to be set up way better for success because obviously they're going to improve the wide receiver room. They're going to improve the offensive line, hopefully, and he's going to be in a much better system. So we're going to see improvements, but I don't know how much in the first year. So again, patience is the main key here, and Carolina fans just have to continue with that.
Yeah, Dan Morgan had some things too. Obviously, this is the first statement we've seen from Morgan really since I think he's been named GM. He might have had some interview within his article. I didn't look too much into it. But he's clearly excited. He said his background in coaching multiple position groups has given him a great understanding of what it takes to build a successful team. His infectious personality resonates with players and everyone who comes in contact with him. I'm confident that will translate to the field. And we talked about this earlier, but I think it's key that him and Morgan come from a very similar lineage within the NFL, and they share a very similar mindset and headspace of where they want this team to go. So I think that's really beneficial and a really big positive. Yeah. And kind of, I would think, is a big reason why he was hired, because his connection to Dan Morgan. So I think that is a good thing over Tepper. Again, we don't know that for sure, but you can kind of try to connect the dots a little bit there. So I think that is good. But I do want to touch on this because, Bryson, I was reading through this when this article came out, literally like 5 minutes. I think it was like 10 minutes before we hit the record button when it actually dropped. And I'm looking through, and the second last paragraph, which was the first sentence was good. The expectation is that Canales will continue to call plays. Great. That's what we want. As with Morgan and Canales, they will report directly to owner David Tepper. Now, I get it. The guy's the owner. I get it. These guys report to them. I get it. That's the obvious. Why the fuck are you putting that in the agreed to terms article? It does not need to be said if it's so fucking obvious to everyone. Why are we stating that? And honestly, I think Canales should be reporting to Morgan, who's that buffer between the two, because we know where Tepper's meddling has been. And I don't care what Ian Rappaport has tweeted out, because he's got his head so far up the NFL's ass, it doesn't matter. Same with Schefter. I mean, those guys are going to protect the shield no matter what. But for this meddling owner who time and time again, the sticky note, passing the sticky note for a play call, every week they're having meetings, sitting down. Frank Reich said it was hell. He basically said it was hell every week meeting with David Tepper. Like, for this to be put in that article, it did not need to be put in there. It did not need to be said. If that's what's going to happen, that's what I don't need to see this shit front and center. Like, that was not the place for it. And that line, and I get it, maybe I'm overreacting. I've been really negative about David Tepper because he's just pissing me off. But I hate this tells me this guy has not learned a fucking thing. But maybe I'm reading into it. I know Jonathan Jones, and I think maybe Jonathan Jones is alluding to this because he obviously is cued in on the Panthers. He tweeted out 30 minutes ago, which is basically when this article came out. He said Morris and Fontenot, which is in Atlanta, the new coach and the GM, report to blank. And they actually put that, Atlanta put that both of those guys will report directly to blank. So I guess it was common maybe in Atlanta. I didn't see it in the Harbaugh initial article, and I haven't looked at the Raiders or anyone else's, but I saw that, and just the way and what we know of David Tepper, I hated every single minute of that. Every single character of that sentence I hated. Every fucking one of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating to read. And it's also another team that does that. Mike Kay shared that Nick Sirianni reports to Howie Rose, or to the owner in whoever the one is in Philly.
Yeah.
Sirianni reports directly to the owner and not to the GM. So I think there are a couple teams that do that. I do agree with you. Why is that in there? I don't understand. Is it to let the fans know that I'm not changing. I'm still going to be having these meetings every week, and that's the expectation. That's what Dave Canales understands coming in. And
It's like a power grab. Like, why say it? If it's so obvious, like everyone, all these beat reporters, it's obvious. Why put it in there?
yeah,
Like, water's wet. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Like, why are we putting this shit in the article? Like, don't put it in there. Everyone, you're being accused of being a meddler. Why the fuck are you putting it front and center? Like,
he
makes
just
no
doesn't
sense to
care.
me.
I think it's clear that he doesn't care what fans or people around Charlotte or even across the league think of him. He's going to do it the way he wants to do it. And it hasn't worked. It's been terrible to this point. It's been the worst in the league since he's taken over. And in my opinion, I don't think he's changed a bit since taking over the team. I don't think anything's humbled him. I don't think I'm sure that's why we didn't interview guys like Jim Harbaugh and Vrabel and Bill Belichick, because no experienced head coach that wants control of certain things is going to work for an owner like David Tepper, who wants to have a weekly check-in to see how things are going. I mean, that's just so disrespectful to have somebody who's never played in the NFL, who's never coached in the NFL, who's never scouted, who probably has maybe thrown a football a handful of times, to check in with him to see how football operations are going, how scouting's going, how play calling. This guy doesn't know. He doesn't know it. So why am I checking in with him on a week to week basis, other than him for him to bitch at me about how the previous week went? I mean, I imagine that was not fun for Frank Reich and probably put a lot of added pressure on him that wasn't needed. He was doing shitty enough in the first place. You don't need to be meeting with the owner every week to take away time from addressing the issues that were at hand. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely frustrating to read that in the article. I quote tweeted your tweet and said that it made me nauseous when I read it, and it did. I got sick to my stomach seeing that. But I mean, it's just I don't know where else we are at this point. I mean, that's our owner. There's nothing we can do about it. He is here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope that this season's a little different. Maybe those meetings are moved to bi-weekly or once a month, and it's not as stringent or, I guess, extensive or stressful for Canales than as it was previously for these other coaches that we've had. I would love for a tell-off from Frank Reich, but I know he's not that kind of
He's not that guy, man. He's
not
not.
that
He's just
guy.
not
He's not,
him.
but I would love it. I think that it could save face for him a little bit, but he's not that kind of guy. He's not going to go and kiss and tell. So, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously frustrating. Fans have a right to be upset. You have a right to be upset about that. And David Tepper has done nothing to earn our respect as an owner, as fans. He's done nothing to earn our trust. He's actually done the opposite. And for him to get that back, we're going to need some long-term success in Carolina. And hopefully that comes soon, because if not, we are going to be literally chasing this guy out of Charlotte. Picketing, we had that March on Mint plan, but that kind of fell through. And
I wasn't doing that. That's I ain't doing that. But let me bring this in here, because this is the first time we're hearing from the coach. Okay, Dave Canales just tweeted this out 7 minutes ago. Excited for what's to come, but right now just thankful for my time with the Buccaneers, amazing fans and organization. Thanks to Coach Bowles, the staff, and the amazing players that I was honored to work with. I'll be rooting for you 15 weeks out of the year. I like that. 15 weeks, no other time. You shouldn't be rooting for them at all, to be totally honest with you. And then he said, thank you. That was his tweet. So, yeah, it's surreal seeing his profile now, because he is pretty active on Twitter. I'm sure that will change once he's coach. I'm assuming, like head coach. I'm sure he's got way too many fish to fry with that. But it's surreal now seeing the picture. He's got the hashtag keep pounding in his bio already. So it's official. And enough about David Tepper. Let's just, just sit in this kind of new hope, I guess, for this team. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I don't think I'm trying to think of anything else that we haven't touched on.
No, I think that for us personally on the podcast, we'll probably be moving towards more of a bi-weekly format. I think that's important to let people know.
Yeah, we'll be back next week more than likely, because obviously they're going to introduce both of these guys, Dan Morgan and Canales. but then it is going to slow down. I'm not doing 100 mock drafts on a second round pick that we have no idea about. And how this board shakes out. It's just too much. But we'll do some check-ins along the way. We obviously have the Senior Bowl coming up soon. I think, after that, it's the Combine, which is going back to Indy. Thank goodness. And then we got pro days and stuff. So we'll be doing some of that. And who knows? Maybe there's a trade involved that might bring us back into the fold too as well. So just something to monitor. But we wanted to get on here. I know we did a podcast that dropped this morning, and this one will drop. You guys will be listening to this on Friday morning, so I hope you enjoy that. But it's a new day in Carolina, some new hope around here, and let's hope that this new regime can bring wins, can bring playoff wins, and eventually bring this team back to a Super Bowl. So we just appreciate everyone for tuning in to the Panthers on Tap podcast. You can catch our episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap for all your analysis and breaking news. And as always,